The twin moons of Talos 9 cast their ethereal glow across the sprawling night market of Stardust Bazaar, where the convergence of a dozen different species created a cacophony of alien languages, exotic scents, and the constant hum of trade negotiations. In the year 2425, the galaxy had become a vast marketplace where even the most remote planets found themselves connected by hyperspace trade routes and interstellar commerce. Marcus Hale squatted in his makeshift shelter, a repurposed shipping container, wedged between a Zephyrian spice merchant and a Thraxian weapons dealer. The container's corrugated walls were adorned with an eclectic collection of artifacts he'd liberated from various archaeological sites across the Outer Rim. A half-empty bottle of Andromedan whiskey sat beside a pile of star charts and unpaid bills, testament to his career as the galaxy's most unreliable treasure hunter. Marcus was the kind of man who could charm his way out of a Hutt's dungeon and into a Centaurian princess's bed in the same afternoon, only to accidentally insult her father's honor guard by dinner time. His reputation for breaking deals was matched only by his uncanny ability to find valuable relics in places where more competent archaeologists had failed. Tonight, however, he was more interested in drowning his sorrows than hunting treasures. "Another deal gone sour," he muttered, taking a swig from the bottle. The Kepler Mining Consortium had just canceled their contract after he'd accidentally triggered an ancient defense system that turned their entire excavation site into a field of crystalline spikes. 10 years of experience, and they still treat me like some amateur tomb raider. The familiar hiss of approaching footsteps on sand caught his attention. Marcus looked up to see a figure emerging from the swirling crowd, tall, graceful, with skin that shimmered between blue and purple in the twin moonlight. She wore flowing robes that seemed to ripple like water, and her eyes held an otherworldly luminescence that marked her as Selunari. "Marcus Hale," she said, her voice carrying the musical cadence of her people. "I am Alara, messenger of the Selunari Conclave. I bring you an opportunity that could restore both your reputation and your finances." Marcus straightened instinctively, extending his hand in the universal human greeting. "Well, hello there, beautiful. Marcus Hale at your service. What kind of opportunity are we talking about?" Alara's expression shifted from diplomatic courtesy to shock, then to something approaching offense. She stepped back, her luminous eyes narrowing. "Human, you're supposed to greet my melons. Not my hand, it's custom." "You're... what now?" Marcus blinked, his alcohol-fogged brain struggling to process what he'd just heard. "Did you just say melons?" "The sacred melons." Alara explained, her voice tightening with indignation. "The fruits of life that hang upon my ceremonial sash." She gestured to two perfectly round, bioluminescent fruits attached to her belt. To ignore them in greeting is to insult the very essence of Selunari hospitality. Marcus stared at the glowing fruits, then back at Alara's increasingly stern expression. "You want me to greet your fruit? It is our way. You must cup them gently, acknowledge their life force, and speak the blessing of prosperity. By offering your hand, without first honoring the melons, you have committed a grave breach of protocol." The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on Marcus, even through his whiskey haze. Here he was on a backwater desert planet, being lectured about fruit etiquette by a purple-skinned alien who looked like she'd stepped out of some fever dream. Yet something in her tone suggested this wasn't merely some elaborate joke. "Look, Lady Alara, I didn't mean any offense. Where I come from, we shake hands. That's how humans do business." "And therein lies the problem," Alara replied, crossing her arms. "Your species' crude customs have already cost you the respect of the Andromedans, the Rigelians, and half the trade guilds in this sector. You wonder why your contracts keep falling through. Perhaps it's because you treat every culture as if it were your own." The truth of her words stung more than Marcus cared to admit. He'd lost more deals to cultural misunderstandings than to his admittedly spotty track record of completing jobs safely. "Fine," he said, standing and steadying himself against the container wall. What's this opportunity you mentioned? And what does it have to do with melon greetings? Ailara's expression softened slightly. The Phantom Archive, a legendary repository of forbidden artifacts hidden in the Veil Nebula. The Selunari Conclave has discovered its location, but our prophets speak of a human who must accompany our expedition. Someone who has walked between worlds and tasted failure. Gee, thanks for the flattering description. The archive contains items that could reshape galactic politics, including the lunar jade, a crystal that enhances psychic abilities beyond measure. But the archive's guardians recognize only those who truly understand respect and reverence. Your misunderstanding provides us with an opportunity. Marcus raised an eyebrow. How's that? You will accompany me to the archive as my cultural student. In exchange for safe passage and a share of any discoveries, you will learn to properly honor Selunari customs, starting with the sacred melon greeting. Before Marcus could respond, the thunderous roar of engines filled the air. Security spotlights blazed to life across the market as 3 Galactic Alliance patrol ships descended from the night sky. Vendors scattered, pulling their wares into shadows as uniformed officers began marching through the bazaar. Expecting company. Ailara asked, her hand moving instinctively to what Marcus now noticed was a sleek energy weapon concealed beneath her robes. Not me. I'm usually better at staying off their radar. His words were cut short as a squad of officers rounded the corner, their leader's cybernetic eye scanning the area before fixing on Marcus's container. Marcus Hale, the squad leader, barked, his voice amplified by his helmet speakers. By order of the Galactic Alliance, you're under arrest for the theft of Andromedan religious artifacts. Ah, hell, Marcus muttered. Ailara, I don't suppose you know another way out of here. Without answering, she grabbed his arm and yanked him toward the back of his container. Through here. My ship is docked at the emergency port. They crashed through a makeshift wall into the neighboring vendor's stall, scattering Thraxian beetle delicacies across the sand. The vendor, a 4-armed insectoid, chittered angrily in his native tongue as they stumbled past. Sorry about the bugs, Marcus called over his shoulder as pulse fire erupted behind them. They weaved through the labyrinthine market, Ailara leading with surprising agility through spaces barely wide enough for her flowing robes. Marcus less gracefully knocked over a display of Zephyrian wind chimes and accidentally triggered a Plutonian honey dispenser, leaving a trail of golden sweetness in their wake. Your species' reputation for subtlety is well earned, Ailara observed dryly as they ducked behind a pyramid of exotic fruits. Hey, I didn't ask to be chased by half the Alliance fleet tonight. What exactly did you tell them about me? Nothing. Though I suspect your troubles have more to do with the Aldrax Syndicate than the Alliance. Marcus's blood ran cold. The Aldrax Syndicate pirates, smugglers, and black market dealers who controlled much of the illegal trade in the Outer Rim. If they were involved, this had just become much more complicated. The Syndicate wants the lunar jade. Ailara continued as they reached her ship, a sleek, organic-looking vessel that seemed to shift and ripple like living tissue. They've been tracking every expedition to the Phantom Archive for months. Your arrest was merely a distraction. As if summoned by her words, a massive explosion rocked the market behind them. Through the smoke and flames, Marcus could see the distinctive crimson hulls of Aldrax fighters descending on the bazaar. Get us out of here, he shouted, as they dove into the ship's opening hatch. Ailara's hands danced over controls that looked more like musical instruments than navigation equipment. The ship lifted off with impossible smoothness, its biomechanical systems seemingly reading her thoughts. Where to? She asked, as pulse fire streaked past the viewports. Anywhere but here. As they broke atmosphere, leaving Talos 9's twin moons behind, Marcus slumped into what he hoped was a chair. The furniture seemed to mold itself to his body, which was either very advanced technology or mildly disturbing biology. So, he said, catching his breath, let me get this straight. You want me to help you find some mystical archive. I need to learn to greet fruit properly. And now, We're being chased by one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the galaxy. You forgot the part where the Archive's guardians will likely kill us if we don't approach with proper reverence, Alara added helpfully. Right, that too. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building that wasn't entirely due to the whiskey. And why exactly do you think I'm the human your prophets were talking about? Alara studied him for a moment, her luminous eyes seeming to peer into his soul. Because you're the first human I've met who was willing to admit his ignorance, rather than defending it as superiority. Gee, another ringing endorsement. The Selunari believe that wisdom begins with acknowledging what one doesn't know. Your willingness to learn despite your obvious discomfort marks you as someone who might truly understand what we're seeking to protect. Marcus looked out at the star field, streaming past the viewport. In the distance, he could see the dim glow of the Veil Nebula, where supposedly the Phantom Archive waited with its treasures and terrors. All right, he said finally. I'll bite. But first, you're going to have to teach me this whole melon greeting thing, because I have a feeling my life might depend on getting it right. Alara smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given him since they'd met. Very well. But first, we need to make a stop at Vela Proxima. There's someone you need to meet. 2 days later, their ship touched down on Vela Proxima, a garden world where the Selunari had established one of their few off-world colonies. The planet's surface was covered in vast crystalline forests that sang in harmonics when the wind passed through them, creating an otherworldly symphony that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. Alara led him through groves of towering crystal trees toward a settlement that looked more like a work of art than a city. Buildings spiraled upward, like frozen waterfalls, their surfaces reflecting and refracting the planet's golden sunlight into rainbow cascades. Your people certainly know how to pick real estate, Marcus commented as they approached the largest of the structures. Beauty is not a luxury for the Selunari, it is necessary for the spirit. We believe that one cannot achieve true understanding while surrounded by ugliness. They entered the building through an archway that seemed to recognize Alara, its crystalline surface shimmering and parting like a curtain of water. Inside, the walls themselves glowed with soft bioluminescence, and the air hummed with the same harmonics as the crystal forests. An elderly Selunari woman approached them, her skin more silver than purple, her eyes carrying the weight of centuries. She moved with the careful grace of age, her ceremonial melon sash adorned with fruits that glowed like captured starlight. Elder Valara. Alara said, immediately approaching the elder's melons with cupped hands. She spoke a phrase in the musical Selunari language, and the fruits pulsed brighter for a moment before settling back to their normal glow. Elder Valara smiled and returned the gesture, greeting Alara's melons with equal reverence. Only then did the two women embrace. And this, Valara said, turning her ancient eyes on Marcus, is the human who would learn our ways. Marcus approached hesitantly, trying to remember everything Alara had tried to teach him during their journey. The melon greeting wasn't just about touching the fruits. It was about acknowledging the life force they represented, the prosperity they symbolized, and the trust their bearer placed in allowing a stranger to approach them. He cupped his hands around Valara's melons, feeling their warmth and the subtle vibration that ran through them. May your melons bring prosperity to all who honor them. Both Selunari women exchanged a look that Marcus couldn't quite interpret. Close, Valara said, diplomatically. But you're thinking of them as separate from their bearer. The melons are not just symbols, they are extensions of our life force. When you greet them, you greet the person's very essence. Let me try again. Marcus took a deep breath, centering himself as Alara had taught him. This time, he looked not just at the fruits, but at Valara herself, trying to connect with the wisdom and experience he could see in her ancient eyes. May the life within these melons flourish, and may the wisdom of their bearer guide our paths to prosperity. The melons pulsed brighter, and Valara's smile grew warm. Much better. You begin to understand. Over the following days, Valara put Marcus through an intensive course in Selunari customs philosophy, and the deeper meaning behind their traditions. The Melon greeting, he learned, was more than just politeness. It was the acknowledgement that all life was interconnected, that prosperity shared was prosperity multiplied. "Your species," Valara explained, as they walked through her gardens, "tends to see interactions as transactions. You give, you receive. The exchange is complete. But for the Selunari, every greeting, every conversation, every shared moment creates ripples that extend far beyond the individuals involved. So when I just stuck out my hand to Elara, you treated her as if she were merely a means to an end, a source of information or opportunity, rather than a living being, deserving of respect for her own sake." Marcus nodded, beginning to understand. "And the Melons force you to slow down, to acknowledge that connection before moving on to business." "Precisely. They are a reminder that we are all part of something larger than ourselves." The lessons weren't just philosophical. Valara also taught him the practical aspects of the greeting, the proper hand position, the specific phrases for different occasions, the subtle variations that indicated relationships and intentions. But more importantly, she taught him to see the melons as more than symbolic fruit. Through meditation techniques, he learned to sense the actual life force flowing through them, the way they responded to emotion and intention. "This is impossible," he muttered during one particularly frustrating session. "I'm not psychic. I can't actually feel fruit emotions." "The melons don't have emotions," Valara corrected gently. "They respond to yours. Every Selunari child learns this. The melons are cultivated specifically to be sensitive to psychic emanations. A proper greeting requires not just words and gestures, but genuine respect and openness." As the days passed, Marcus found himself changing in ways he hadn't expected. The forced mindfulness of the melon greeting began to affect how he approached everything else. He started noticing details he'd previously ignored, the way Alara's robes shifted color, with her moods, the subtle harmonics in Valara's voice that conveyed meaning beyond words, the way the crystal forests seemed to respond to the emotional state of those who walked among them. "I'm starting to think your whole culture is psychic," he said to Alara one evening, as they watched Vela Proxima's triple sunset paint the crystal trees in impossible hues. "Not psychic exactly," she replied. "But we are more attuned to the connections between all things. The melons are just one way we remember to honor those connections." "And the Phantom Archive. How does all this relate to some ancient repository of forbidden knowledge?" Alara's expression grew serious. "The archive wasn't built by the Kelunari. It's much older, from the first civilizations to span the galaxy. But its guardians were specifically programmed to recognize true respect and reverence, not just the words and gestures, but the intention behind them. So if I haven't truly internalized this whole melon philosophy, then we die horribly, yes." On their 7th day on Vela Proxima, their peaceful training was interrupted by the screaming of alarm crystals throughout the settlement. Marcus and Elara rushed to the observation deck to see Aldrak's fighters emerging from hyperspace above the planet. "How did they find us?" Marcus demanded. "The same way they found you on Talos 9, Elara replied grimly. "They have someone inside the Galactic Alliance feeding them information." Elder Valara appeared beside them, her ancient face creased with worry. "The archive's location must remain secret. If the Aldrak Syndicate finds it, the entire galactic balance of power could shift," Ilara finished. "They'd use the artifacts for conquest rather than preservation." Marcus watched the fighters descending toward the settlement. "Then we better get there first. Is my education in melon diplomacy complete?" Valara studied him for a long moment. "You've learned the forms, and more importantly, you've begun to understand the spirit behind them. But Marcus," she placed a weathered hand on his shoulder, "the greatest test will come when you face the Archive's guardians. They will see through any deception, any attempt to fake reverence. You must truly believe." "No pressure," Marcus muttered. As the first pulse blasts struck the settlement's shields, they rushed to Elara's ship. But before they could take off, a massive Aldrak's cruiser dropped out of hyperspace directly above them, its weapon ports already glowing. Captain Thorne. Alara breathed, recognizing the ship's distinctive skull markings. The most ruthless pirate in the Outer Rim. The ship's communication system crackled to life. Alara of the Selunari, a gravelly voice, filled with artificial enhancement, spoke. You will surrender the Archive's coordinates, or we will reduce this entire settlement to ash. He's bluffing, Marcus said. The Alliance would never allow the massacre of a civilian colony. The Alliance isn't here, Valara replied quietly, and Captain Thorne is not known for empty threats. As if to prove her point, one of the cruiser's main batteries fired, vaporizing a section of crystal forest several kilometers away. The harmonics of 1,000 dying trees created a wail that seemed to echo from the planet's core. You have 1 hour, Thorne's voice continued. After that, we start with the populated areas. Marcus looked at the faces around him. Alara's determined fury, Valara's grief-stricken resolve. He thought about the past week, about everything he'd learned, about the connections between all living things that the Selunari held so sacred. There's another way, he said slowly. The Archive isn't just about keeping its treasures away from people like Thorne. It's about proving that some things can only be accessed through understanding, not force. What are you suggesting? Alara asked. We go to the Archive. We get there first, and we make sure that whatever's inside Thorne can never use it. Elder Valara nodded slowly. The Guardians have defenses beyond anything the Aldrak Syndicate has encountered. If you can prove your worthiness, then maybe they'll help us deal with our pirate problem, Marcus finished. They launched under cover of an ion storm, Alara's ship slipping through the electromagnetic chaos, while Thorne's cruiser was temporarily blinded. But Marcus knew they had perhaps a day's head start at most. The Veil Nebula was a maze of gas clouds and electromagnetic interference that made navigation treacherous, even for the most advanced ships. Ancient legends spoke of entire fleets that had entered the nebula, never to be seen again. The coordinates are here, Alara said, consulting a crystal data core that projected a three-dimensional map of the nebula. But the path changes. The Archive exists in a pocket of stable space-time, but the routes to reach it shift with the nebula's currents. How are we supposed to find something that keeps moving? We follow the songs, she replied, activating what Marcus initially thought was the ship's communication system. But instead of radio signals, it began picking up something else, harmonics, similar to those of the crystal forests on Vela Proxima, but older, deeper, resonating from somewhere deep within the nebula. The Archive calls to those who seek it with proper intent, Alara explained. The songs guide worthy seekers home. For hours, they navigated through the nebula's churning colors, brilliant purples and golds that danced across their view screens like living aurora. The songs grew stronger, more complex, as if an entire choir was welcoming them home from a long journey. Finally, they emerged into a sphere of clear space, where the nebula's gases formed a protective shell around a structure that defied easy description. The Phantom Archive wasn't a building in any conventional sense. It was a crystalline growth, the size of a small moon, its faceted surfaces reflecting and refracting the nebula's light into patterns that seemed to move with purpose. By all the sacred melons, Alara whispered, it's beautiful. As they approached, sections of the Archive's surface began to glow, forming patterns that looked almost like writing. No, Marcus realized, not writing. More like circuit diagrams or maybe musical notation. It's scanning us, he said. Testing us, Alara corrected, determining whether we're worthy to enter. Their ship was drawn into a docking bay that opened like a flower blooming in fast forward. The moment they landed, Marcus could feel something change in the air, a presence ancient and vast examining their intentions with the patience of eons. They made their way through corridors that seemed to be carved from a single, enormous crystal, their walls pulsing with gentle bioluminescence. The architecture was simultaneously organic and geometric, as if mathematics had been given living form. "The Guardians," Alara said as they approached a vast chamber ahead. "They're waiting." The chamber was dominated by 3 towering constructs of crystal and light, each one unique in form, but clearly part of a unified consciousness. They had no faces in any conventional sense, but Marcus could feel their attention focused on him with laser intensity. "Welcome, Seekers." A voice spoke directly into their minds, harmonized in perfect thirds, like a chord struck on some cosmic instrument. "We are the keepers of the archive. State your purpose." Alara stepped forward. "We seek the lunar jade to prevent it from falling into the hands of those who would misuse its power." "And you, child of Earth," the voice shifted to address Marcus specifically. "What do you seek?" Marcus took a deep breath, thinking of everything Valara had taught him. "I seek understanding, not just of your artifacts, but of the connections between all living things. I want to learn to see the universe as more than just a collection of things to be taken." "Impressive words, but words are empty vessels. Show us your truth." Suddenly, Alara materialized before him, not the real Alara, but some kind of simulacrum created by the Guardians. This version approached him with cupped hands, her ceremonial melons glowing with the same light as the archive's walls. Marcus realized this was the test. Not just whether he could perform the greeting correctly, but whether he truly understood what it meant. He approached slowly, mindfully seeing not just the simulacrum, but remembering every moment of connection he'd experienced over the past week. The way Valara's ancient eyes had sparkled when he'd finally grasped a particularly difficult concept. The sound of Alara's laughter when he'd accidentally complimented the melons' robust aroma instead of their radiant essence. He cupped his hands around the glowing fruits, feeling the warmth that ran through them, the life force that connected them to everything else in the universe. But more than that, he felt the trust being placed in him, the willingness to be vulnerable to allow a stranger access to something sacred. May the life within these melons remind us that we are all part of a greater whole. He said the words coming from his heart rather than his memory. May their light guide us to prosperity that enriches not just ourselves, but everyone whose paths we cross. The melons blazed with brilliant light, and for a moment, Marcus felt connected to everything: the archive, the nebula Alara, the distant crystal forests of Vela Proxima, even the angry pirates pursuing them through space. He felt the web of connections that bound all life together, the way every action rippled outward to touch countless other lives. "Well done," the Guardians spoke, their voice now warm with approval. "You have learned to see beyond yourself. The lunar jade is yours to protect." A section of the chamber floor rose, revealing a crystal the size of a human head that seemed to contain entire galaxies within its faceted depths. But even as Marcus reached for it, alarms began sounding throughout the archive. "The Aldrax," Alara said grimly. "They've found us." Through the chamber's transparent walls, they could see Thorn's cruiser emerging from the nebula, its weapons already charging. "The archive will protect itself," the Guardian said. "But the choice is yours: flee with the jade or stand and fight." Marcus looked at the crystal, then at Alara, then at the advancing ship. "What happens if Thorn gets inside?" "The archive will test him as it tested you. But his heart is filled with greed and violence. He will fail, and the testing will likely destroy him. And if he doesn't try to enter, if he just blasts his way through..." The Guardian's silence was answer enough. "Then we make a stand," Marcus decided. "But first, Alara, I need to know. Can the melons be used for more than just greetings?" She looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "Valara mentioned they respond to psychic emanations. The jade enhances psychic abilities. What if we combine them?" Understanding dawned in her eyes. The melons could focus and amplify the jade's power. But Marcus, the strain on a non-cellunari. "Might kill me, yeah. But if it works, we could protect the archive without having to destroy Thorn's ship. Maybe even change his mind." Before Alara could argue, the first blast from the cruiser struck the archive's outer shell. The crystal structure shuddered, but held its surface glowing brighter as defensive systems activated. Marcus lifted the lunar jade, feeling its power flowing through him like liquid starlight. "Help me," he said to Alara. "Guide me through this." She nodded, removing her ceremonial melons from their sash. Together, they approached the chamber's center, where a complex mandala pattern had been carved into the floor. "Place the jade in the center," Alara instructed. "The melons go here and here. Now, cup your hands over all three and open your mind to their connection." The moment Marcus's hands touched the arrangement, the universe exploded into sensation. He could feel every living thing in the nebula, the archive's vast consciousness, the crew of Thorn's ship, even the microscopic organisms that fed on the nebula's gases. But more than that, he could feel their emotions, their motivations. Thorn's crew wasn't united in greed. Many of them were desperate, turned to piracy, because legitimate opportunities had been closed to them. And Thorn himself, beneath the anger and violence, Marcus sensed a profound loneliness, a man who had chosen conquest because he'd never learned any other way to connect with others. "Can you reach him?" Alara asked, her voice seeming to come from very far away. "I can try." Marcus extended his consciousness outward, carried by the combined power of the jade and the melons. He touched Thorn's mind gently, not trying to force or control, but simply to communicate. Images flowed between them, Marcus's own journey from selfish treasure hunter to someone who understood the value of connection, the beauty of Selunari culture, the wisdom of the melon greeting the way respect and reverence could create bonds stronger than any weapon. For a moment, the cruiser's weapons stopped firing. "Captain," a voice crackled over Thorn's comm system. "Are you all right? Your bio readings are fluctuating." "I'm fine," Thorn replied slowly. "Stand down, weapons." "Sir, you heard me. Stand down." Marcus maintained the connection, sharing more images, the way the Kelunari settlements thrived through cooperation, how prosperity could be achieved without conquest, how connection and respect could replace fear and violence. But the strain was enormous. He could feel his human nervous system overloading, the power of the jade burning through him like fire. "Marcus," Alara's voice urgent and afraid, "you have to let go. You're killing yourself." "Not yet," he gasped. "Almost there." Through the connection, he felt Thorn's worldview shifting, like tectonic plates realigning. Memories surfaced, a young Thorn, abandoned on a frontier world, learning that strength was the only thing that kept you alive. Layer by layer, the armor of violence and aggression that had built up over decades began to crack. "I understand," Thorn whispered, and the words echoed in both minds through their connection. "I've been so alone." Marcus collapsed, the connection severing, as his consciousness snapped back to his own body. Alara caught him, her hands immediately checking his condition with medically trained efficiency. "The bio readings say he's alive," she reported to the Guardians. "But barely." Through the chamber's walls, they watched Thorn's cruiser, slowly backing away from the archive. A communication signal reached them. "This is Captain Thorn." The pirate's voice came through, but it was different now, less harsh, more uncertain. We're withdrawing. I need to think, to reconsider some things." The cruiser turned and vanished back into the nebula, leaving the archive in peace. "Remarkable," the Guardians observed. "In all our eons of existence, we have never seen someone use our testing chamber to heal, rather than judge." Marcus struggled to sit up, his head still ringing from the psychic backlash. "Is he really changed, or will he just come back with more ships?" "True change takes time," Alara replied. "But what you showed him, what you let him feel, that can't be unfelt. He'll struggle with it probably for years, but the seed of understanding is planted." Over the following weeks, as they recovered in the archive and prepared for their return journey, Marcus learned more about the true extent of the repository's knowledge. It wasn't just artifacts and weapons it contained, the collected wisdom of dozens of extinct civilizations' technologies that could cure diseases, end hunger, even prevent wars. "Why keep it hidden?" he asked the Guardians during one of their conversations. "This stuff could help billions of people." "Because wisdom without understanding is dangerous," they replied. "Your species has a saying, give someone a fish and they eat for a day. Teach them to fish and they eat for a lifetime. We do not give fish. We teach fishing." So the whole thing, the melon greeting the cultural tests, it's all about making sure people understand the responsibility that comes with power. Understanding, respect, connection, reverence. These are not just pleasant customs. They are the foundation upon which any lasting peace must be built. When they finally departed the archive, Marcus carried with him not just the lunar jade, but something far more valuable, a completely changed perspective on his place in the universe. The Celunari Conclave formally recognized him as an honored guest, the first human to fully grasp the deeper meaning behind their traditions. But more than titles or recognition, Marcus found himself changed at a fundamental level. He began to see every interaction, every negotiation, every chance encounter as an opportunity for connection rather than just transaction. The Galactic Alliance dropped all charges against him when they learned of his role in preventing the Aldrax Syndicate from acquiring archive technology. Captain Thorne, true to the change Marcus had witnessed in him, disbanded his criminal organization and began working as a mediator for conflicts in the Outer Rim territories. Marcus established himself as a cultural ambassador, helping to bridge the gap between human and alien societies. His reputation for understanding and respecting alien customs made him one of the most sought-after negotiators in the galaxy. But perhaps the most significant change was in his approach to everyday life. Every morning, Marcus performed his own version of the melon greeting, not with actual fruit, but with a moment of mindfulness, where he acknowledged his connection to everyone he would meet that day. "It's not about the melons," he explained to a gathering of prospective ambassadors 6 months later. "It's about taking a moment to remember that the being in front of you is an entire universe of experience, hopes, fears, and dreams. When you truly understand that when you feel it in your bones, everything else follows." As he spoke, Alara entered the room, her ceremonial melons glowing softly with contentment. Marcus approached her, cupping his hands around the sacred fruits. "May your melons bring prosperity to all whose lives they touch," he said, "and may their light remind us that we are never truly alone." Alara smiled, returning the greeting with practiced grace. "Well done, my friend. Elder Valara would be proud." They had just received word that the Galactic Council was organizing a great conference, representatives from over 100 species coming together to establish new protocols for interspecies relations. The Council had specifically requested that Marcus lead a workshop on cultural understanding. "Are you ready to teach 100 different species the importance of respecting each other's customs?" Alara asked. Marcus grinned, feeling more prepared for a challenge than he had in years. "As long as nobody expects me to memorize the proper greetings for all of them. I'm pretty sure the Rigelians require some kind of interpretive dance." "Actually," Alara said thoughtfully, "they do." As they laughed together, Marcus reflected on how far he'd come from that drunken night in the Stardust Bazaar. He'd lost his cynicism, but gained something infinitely more valuable: the understanding that in a universe of infinite diversity, the common thread that connected all intelligent life was the simple desire to be seen, understood, and respected. The melon greeting had taught him that wisdom wasn't about knowing all the answers, but about understanding the right questions. And the most important question of all wasn't, "What can I get from this interaction?" but rather, "How can I honor the being I'm meeting as a fellow traveler in this vast, wondrous universe?" As their ship prepared for departure to the Galactic Conference, Marcus stood at the viewport, watching the stars wheel past. Somewhere out there, Captain Thorne was probably struggling with his own version of the melon greeting, learning to replace conquest with connection. The universe was vast and strange, and full of customs that could baffle even the most experienced explorer. But Marcus had learned that with patience, respect, and genuine curiosity, any bridge could be built, any understanding could be reached. After all, sometimes the most profound wisdom could be found in the simplest acts, like taking a moment to properly greet someone's melons. The thought made him chuckle, and he realized that perhaps the greatest gift the Selunari had given him wasn't deeper understanding of their culture, but the ability to find profound meaning in what others might see as absurd. In a universe where beings communicated through bioluminescent fungi, negotiated through interpretive dance, or expressed their highest respect by carefully greeting each other's fruit, perhaps absurdity and profundity were just two sides of the same cosmic coin. And Marcus Hale, former treasure hunter and current cultural ambassador, had finally learned to appreciate both sides equally.